Hey guys, today I interview Scott Limmer, a very good friend of mine and a highly experienced guide and outfitter. We're talking about an individual who has guided 80, 90, 100 plus elk hunts, mule deer, moose, sheep, goat, all the Western species. He has an insane amount of experience with very little social media presence, not well known on that front, but we're talking about true in the field experience. So we dive into a bunch of different topics across the board. We talk about archery elk tactics up in the wilderness. We talk about rifle tactics. And then we also get into some interesting topics, at least I think they're interesting. We talk about CWD in the mule deer population in Colorado and the overall management plan for CWD. We talk about the lab leak theory in the CWD world that it seems like everybody who knows biologists, down, in the weeds on this, it's not necessarily a theory. It seems to be like the prevalent idea of where it came from. So we talk about that. That might be an interesting conversation to you. We talk about the new 5-year structure in Colorado, and we talk about the politics around the lion ban in Colorado. So all over the place, but tons of tips and tricks in addition to just our thoughts on the overall hunting world. So without further ado, let's dive right in. All right, guys, so I wanted to mention that I'm having these custom skinning knives made. These are called Cliff Skinner. I've got a whole bunch of reasons why I've had this knife made the way that it's made. I've got a short video on the website. The details are there. Pursuitwithcliff.com. Click in the corner up by shop. You'll see Cliff Skinner. Click that puppy. You'll get all the details. All right, Scott, I'm super pumped to have you, man. I'm trying to think about how long ago it was when we met. I'm thinking like maybe 12, 13 years ago, something in that realm, which is crazy because it's like time goes by. And the thing is, Scott, is even before I met you, I have to admit that you were somebody that I mimicked in the outfitting business. Like I used you as a model when I was building my business up. Before we even knew each other, and then in many ways, particularly on the business front, man, you were a mentor of mine in the business, and then I enjoyed spending time with you over the years, on the phone, discussing business and outfitting and guiding and all of that. You were very helpful to me over the years, even though we didn't spend that much time in person together.
Yeah.
We worked together on a few little hunts, but we didn't spend a whole lot of in-person time with each other because we were basically competing with each other.
Well, yeah, I remember talking with you a lot, kind of helping you with some Forest Service questions, and when you were getting started, and the a good friend of mine used to own the area where you were at then,
Sure.
and Dennis Bergstad. So he's passed away now, but yeah, I was happy to help you with anything I could. I mean, I'm kind of an open book. But yeah, it was good times. And then, we did a couple hunts over your way. But yeah, we're in different parts of the state too. So, we didn't really see each other a whole lot, just at meetings and stuff.
Yeah, sure. So we had a relationship in that regard. But one of the reasons I thought it'd be great to have you on, Scott, is what I would put you very much in the box of hunters, guides, outfitters that have an insane amount of experience, particularly on a lot of these species that like a ton of my viewership is interested in, right? Particularly like Colorado elk, mule deer, antelope, all the Western species. You have an extensive amount of experience in the field, but you don't have a massive like social media following or YouTube channel or Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
But you have this depth of knowledge. And I've tried to go through like in the last, doing these interviews, that's what I've noticed people really like hearing from. So that's why I thought it'd be cool to have you on, Scott. So if you don't mind, give people just a brief intro to where you operate, your history, outfitting.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the Black Hills of South Dakota and always loved to hunt, and came down to Fort Collins, Colorado to go to Colorado State University, where I studied business and biology, and spent a lot of time in the mountains at this Colorado State University's mountain campus, working on research projects with, like guys doing their doctorates and stuff. And so I got to know the area. My first year here, of course, I went deer hunting. I jumped into elk hunting the following year, and my dad would come out. We'd rent some horses from a friend of mine here, and we'd go on our own. And just kind of started like that. I just loved to hunt. I met the outfitter in the area, in the wilderness area that we outfit in now. We rented horses from him. He was just a part-time guy. Worked at Kodak, back in the before the digital days,
Sure.
and he was a supervisor at a big Kodak plant here in Windsor, Colorado, and just played around outfitting, had the permit, and then I helped him put in his camp a time or two, and then we got to be friends. I rented horses from him, and then one day he called me. He's like, "Hey, I'm gonna retire from Kodak early, and they're offering me early retirement, and I'm gonna, are you interested in the outfit? Because I'm moving to Arizona for the winters. And I was like, wow, so it just kind of fell on me. I mean, I always thought about being a guide and outfitter, but that's kind of how I got started. I took his small outfit over, and then, over the years, I built it up to what it is now.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And Scott, not to start off with like a super deep question, but I gotta ask you because I never asked you in person. You're the type of guy, man. Like I know, just dealing with you on business stuff, you probably would have been successful doing like 1,000 other different types of businesses. If you had a car wash business or a dental office or whatever, you would have been successful. Do you ever reflect on that decision, man, and think about the positives and negatives of that path? Because I mean, this is what you've. I mean, how long have you been at it now?
I started my 34th season now.
Yeah, yeah, it's wild, man. I mean, time flies. I mean, do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts on that? Do you have any thoughts on
You know,
that choice?
my dad and my younger brother are in, stock brokerage or investment business, and my dad always wanted me to do that, but I just love to be outside too much, and so I let my younger brother kind of go down that road, and but they all come out here and hunt with me, and my dad, kind of helped me get started, sending me some clients, my first couple of years, and
Sure.
so I really don't. I'm very happy. I mean, I get paid to hunt for a living. I mean, it's awesome, and I respect both outfitted hunts and non-outfitted. I mean, I've drawn a lot of tags myself in the Western states, and I know how it is to be a client as well. So I think that has helped me a lot, like how to build my hunts to where I try to look at it from the client perspective.
Yeah.
But I think I regret it at all. I mean, it's a battle with the government agencies at times, as you know, and all
Sure.
the work, and there's a lot behind the scenes that it all looks like glory for guys like you and I, but there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that has to get done before we can get to even go on the hunt.
Yeah.
Um, Other than that stuff, which someday I'll be out from under that and I'll just be guiding, until I retire. But no, I don't really have any big regrets, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, man. It's funny because one thing you've been able to do, man, and I struggled with it. I was able to do it, but it was always a struggle for me. Is you've been able to stay in the field guiding at least some, right? You've
Yeah.
never had years where you literally did like no guiding.
No, I mean, I guide as many hunts, more hunts myself than any single guide for me does. But as a group, of course, they guide more hunts than I do.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yep,
We
yep,
have
yep. But
outfit,
yeah,
but
but you stay in the game.
try to still get everything done ahead of time so I can enjoy the hunts. And there's always things that come up, as you have to handle. Um, but no, I still do quite a bit of guiding.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And what you just touched on, man, I actually had it. I asked some guys that follow my social media, any questions they might have for a guy like you. And dude, this is very or fairly unique. And I do it to some extent, but I know that you've done a lot of it, Scott. You, as an outfitter, have gone on quite a few outfitted guided hunts yourself, right? As a client, as you
Yeah, I mean,
mentioned.
I've got my sheep slam. I've been to Tajikistan, got my Marco Polo. I've been to Africa 9 or 10 times.
Sure.
Last year I was in the Yukon with my son for his Doll sheep hunt. So yeah, I've drawn all the Western states for elk. Used outfitters on all of them because I know what local knowledge can bring. I mean, I don't have time to go to Arizona and scout, or New Mexico or Nevada or wherever. But and I have a lot of good friends and contacts in the business, so I could go with them. Um, but yeah, no, I've done a lot of guided, been guided myself a lot, and a lot of guys like you hear, well, I don't know if I would book a guided hunt, and I don't think people get it. Like, I'm very secure in my hunting skills, right? It's not an
Sure.
easy for me to have to do it on my own. I'm fully capable of doing whatever I want to do on my own, but I just enjoy having somebody with me and friends and outfitted friends, whatever. I always tell our hunters when they're wondering if they should book a sheep or goat or moose hunt or something like, it's a once in a lifetime tag and we're paid friends. We can't,
Yeah,
we will show up.
yeah,
You know,
sure.
here I get a lot of calls every year from sheep hunters that were going to do it on their own, and then all their friends petered out on them.
Right.
So we can't do that to you. So we're contracted. So that's kind of my philosophy on it. I mean, I have no ego in this game to like, oh, I'm going to go to Nevada and get my own elk and do it yourself and all. I could do that, no question. But I just, I know what the local knowledge can bring.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally get it, man. And I have the same mindset on it. Like I go on lots of, guided
Yeah,
stuff myself. Um, and the thing is that what's interesting about it, Scott, is I have had like some of the best hunters I know were clients of mine. Like
sure.
once I got to hunting with them, I realized like, oh, this guy's very capable in many ways. I'm I'm learning little things from this client, you know. And so it's not like I think that's a misnomer that clients are always kind of like, clueless or whatever.
Yeah, I like to tell our hunters, we don't lead you around by the nose and tell you how high to jump. I mean, it's your hunt. It's just like a cooperative relationship, like
Right.
we're helping each other glass. Yeah, we'll handle the lodging and the meals and all that kind of stuff. But the hunting, I mean, I like it when the hunters are also helping. I once in a while I'll get a hunter like on a ranch type hunt. We're in the truck and the guy's just on his phone all the time and looking down, not helping me look for deer or something. That kind of I don't like that. I like the guys that like to fully participate. And I'm like you. I've had some hunters that have hunted with me that hunt all over the world. That they're very good hunters, but they just know what as a local what I can bring to the table when they draw a tag here.
What is the best way to differentiate between a good guide and a smooth talker that takes your money and doesn't produce? I've had a few bad experiences with guides. I thought through our conversations and I was getting a good opportunity to find out later he was full of baloney and just a salesman. And so the question is like how do you screen guides or outfitters, Scott?
Yeah, I guess it's tough. I guess word of mouth is a lot to me and other referrals. And, like you mentioned earlier, I'm not a big social media guy. I mean, I didn't have a website for my business till, I don't know, 6 or 8 years ago. I mean,
Right.
I was all, I have a marketing degree, but I sent out newsletters and that's how I marketed. I didn't really have, social media. I remember, um, you know, one of the bigger outfitters in Utah, Doyle Moss. I booked a hunt with him one time. I drew a Utah tag with one of his guides, and he's like, "Dude, you're leaving a lot on the table. You should have a TV show. You should have like
Sure.
DVDs. You should be selling. All these good animals you guys get. You're leaving a lot of money on the table. You don't have a very good website or one at all." I'm like, I just love to hunt. I'm
Yeah.
not. I've never really. Been sponsored by gear companies, stuff all like that. I just love the products that I love and I'm going to use them. I don't care, who's
Sure.
not, but yeah, I don't know, to spot other outfitters, I just hear so much, I guess. So maybe I'm in a different league than the guy just, looking for his first sheep hunt or something in Alaska or something. I've already heard so many stories from hunters of mine. And so I use a lot of that experience, but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and what I used to say is the proof is in the pictures. Like in the old days before the internet, I sent out a newsletter with all our pictures from that year, all current pictures. And people were like, I still get people that call me like, man, I really miss your packets of information with pictures.
Sure.
Proof is in the pictures. If you go on somebody's website and the pictures are 10 years old, looking at the clothing people are wearing and the animals and
Yeah.
they're all faded out. I mean, pictures are worth a lot to me. If you're
Yeah, sure.
animals, that means a lot to me. And then just word of mouth, I guess. And
Yeah. Yeah, I find, Scott, that I think, I mean, to your general point, people way underestimate just the value of like networking kind of within the hunting world. You know what I mean? Because
yeah,
if I'm going on a hunt and you share this too, like to some extent we uniquely have the opportunity that we know somebody that's a stone sheep guide or we know somebody who's whatever we're doing. We probably know if we want to go Florida alligator hunting, like we know somebody through somebody, right? That's going to tell us who to go with. But I actually think that for just your normal guy who goes on a couple guided hunts a year, they can build that up. Like at first they may not hit it quite right, but once they start to know some people and they get in good with a couple outfitters, like that's the best way, just to network and
Yeah.
and get recommendation, because there's certain, it's really hard if you're just getting like generic references or you're trying to
Yeah.
Google stuff. But if you know somebody that's like in the know or tangentially knows somebody and you trust their opinion, that's that's the most valuable info, I think.
Yeah, and like when it could be different, like internationally, like looking at Africa, there's so many choices. Some guys that go over there get attached to a certain pH or guide. I don't, I enjoy that, but I look at the area. Like I really research areas. You know,
Sure.
like even in the U.S., like I remember I was going Dall sheep hunting. I was trading a guy partially a mule deer hunt for a sheep hunt with him for Dall sheep in Alaska, and he switched areas on me, and they wanted me to follow through with the trade. And I'm like, no offense, but I wanted to hunt the Chugach. Now you're
Yeah.
in Wrangles, and in my opinion, not the best part of the Wrangles. And so I wanted a heavy sheep with good bases, and I am a trophy hunter. There's no question. I
Sure.
tell my guides this too. Like I would rather myself not shoot an animal than shoot when I'm not going to be happy with. And I try to do that with our clients too. Like one of the biggest things I think guides need to learn is not only is it your job to tell the hunter when to shoot, but also when not to shoot. You
Sure.
know, like if the animal isn't a good representative of the area, it's not big enough, or you know. But I'm not a tag filler, never have been. Even on my personal hunts, I drew a Arizona deer tag a few years ago in the late season, and I didn't shoot a deer, but I was happy with the hunt. I still talk with that outfitter. We're buddies. I mean, we
Sure.
hunted hard, just I just didn't shoot one. But yeah, I guess there's a lot of facets to it, but yeah, word of mouth is key, and pictures. Like I said, I love to if you got a not just one or two pictures, you got several pictures of that species that are all bigger animals. If you're looking for that type of a trophy hunt, then that means a lot to me.
Yeah, 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 sure. I mean, you can't fake that to the extent that, I mean,
Yeah,
there's obviously like bad characters out there that probably do, but
yeah,
in general, like you can't, that's not a big deal to worry about. But it is it's an interesting topic, and part of it, Scott, and this is like just having been in the business, and I'd love to hear your opinion, but I do think, and I'm not saying that the person who asked this question is saying this, but I think it's important for particularly newer guys that are going on like their first few guided hunts. If you're going on hunts that are in, an uncontrollable type of environment,
yeah,
which is, most places, right? Colorado, wilderness, Alaska, all of that, you have to realize that there's variability, and I think sometimes people, they either, it can cut both ways. They can catch an awesome wilderness elk hunt, and they're on an archery wilderness elk hunt in Colorado on a 1 point tag or something, and they kill a 315-inch bull, right? And then all of a sudden that sets their expectations. Or they can go on the same hunt, and it's, they just hardly see any elk, and then they're bitter about outfitters in general. And I think you have to kind of understand that there's variability in these hunts regardless of, where it is. Do you have
yeah.
thoughts on that?
You know, you talk to like a booking agent, like they'd rather book 10 African safaris than one elk hunt. Elk are so fickle, they're so tough,
Yeah.
they're giant whitetail on steroids. I mean, wilderness elk, especially are spooky. And so it can be difficult. You have to grind it out. There's days when there's hunts where, you get one on the first day or two and it's, this is easy, and then there's other ones like you grind out. And yeah, elk are fickle, man. I mean, you got to put your time in and be, persevere. And that's one thing I find like some guys aren't used to. Like a lot of guys back east, maybe, whitetail hunt on weekends, or they go to their cabin or their farm for a couple days. We're out in the woods for a whole week, and a lot of guys aren't used to that, and
Sure.
even nowadays to see guys that like they kind of struggle not being around their phone for a week in the backcountry, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, like like separation anxiety from it.
Yeah, I have wives call the house here and talk to my wife Wendy, and they're like, I haven't heard from my husband Jim for like 4 days, and my wife's like, yeah, well, he's in the wilderness. There's no coverage, you know, like,
Yeah, yeah. Wendy's like, I haven't talked to Scott in 3 weeks.
yeah. My wife always tells them the good news, you know, don't worry about it. But
Yeah.
perseverance with elk, you know, elk are tough, man. I mean, you know, we do really well on elk. We had a great year last year. You know, we've had some fires here that really turned our habitat on, and but it's still, you know, it can be a grind, you know. So I would tell guys, you know, don't judge a elk hunt, you know, like, you know, you went on one, it could have been awesome or it could have been tough, you know, but you know, you got to go on several, and things will happen the way you know, if you go in good areas with good people, things should moderate out and be good, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. On average, you're gonna have a good time. There's gonna be a little variability. Scott,
Yeah.
how many? Do you have a ballpark idea how many elk hunts you've guided?
Me, myself,
Yeah,
gosh, I don't know, man. I couldn't even, I mean, 34 years of several a year, you know,
yeah,
you know,
yeah. So
we
you
have a long
probably
than most outfitters, you know, we start like with the normal seasons, you know, archery in September and muzzleloader and the regular 4 rifle seasons. And, you know, we have a unit 20 here that we do December and January bull elk hunts. So I probably guided more elk hunts than most any other outfitter in Colorado. I don't know, you know, because we have a longer season.
Yeah, yeah. So it's, I mean, yeah, I mean, these are just my words, Scott. Like you personally probably guided 70 or 80 elk hunts, probably pretty easy, and probably your outfit's like north of 1,000 if you count all your drop camp guys and everybody else. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, my numbers are higher than that. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, even higher. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
dude, it's a huge data set, and it's just like it's amazing. You know, over time, you get to see that. Do you have any like, is there any define other than what you just said, like just ability to stay out in the mountains, and maybe that is the key component. But is there anything that you've seen amongst your clientele? Let's talk about elk hunts in particular that differentiate guys that are just in general more successful than the average guy.
I guess it's hard. I mean, because they're most of them I see are guided, you know. But like we have some
Sure.
really repeat drop camp groups where I've taught them, you know, like you guys have to be out there at first light. You know, you can't be sleeping in. You can't in the evening. You've got to stay out there in these areas that I've marked up the maps for you on or shown you that like you have to be there till dark. You can't be
Right.
hiking camp, you know, because you're afraid of the dark, you know, and especially with GPSs nowadays, there's no reason for that, you know. And I also try and one of the tips I use elk hunt is I don't use a headlamp very little. I mean, I'll hold it in my hand down at the ground, and
Yeah.
if I need it at all, I have good night vision, so I can see the rocks and the stuff when I'm hiking to get to a spot to glass in the dark. But if you have to use the light, I just hold it down at the ground in my right hand, you know, right down and shine the immediate ground. I don't have it on my head, you know, flashing all over the map,
Sure.
you know. I'll see that with other hunters sometimes, you know, like I'll see a light like 2, 3 miles away and some guy's headlamp, you know, or he's up on a ridge somewhere. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I do all the little things that sometimes people think, you know, is over the top, but you know, added up over the years, I know that they have helped me take several elk that we wouldn't have gotten.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, sure.
like we don't hunt with our horses a whole lot. We use them to get in and out of camp. We split our hunters up into different camps. We don't have a big base camp with 6 hunters and 3, 4, 5 guides, and we ride away from each other every day. We have several smaller camps, and I'll just have 2 hunters in a camp out there with a guide, or one with a hunter and a guide. And we're already split up, so we're sneaking around on foot a lot. You know, we're not riding, you know, right through the good areas and all that. I mean, horses are noisy, you know,
Right.
and so just little things like, you know, put every little thing to your advantage. And it might seem excessive, but, you know, I know that that has helped us get animals that otherwise might have slipped through, you know, several animals like that over the years.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think I mean the your point of just that like the little things add up, even if half the things you're doing don't even matter. You
Right.
know what I mean? Is it adds up over time. And dude, I gotta dig into the timing thing a little bit because I tell guys the same thing, Scott, and I think it's actually the perfect example of what you're talking about. Like staying that last 5 minutes of light,
Exactly.
while you're glassing, yeah, it doesn't seem like that big a deal, and there's always this urge to get back to camp or whatever.
Yep.
But over 7 days, it adds up to another 45 minutes or whatever that is like the prime time to see game. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Time I was guiding some guys first rifle on, in the wilderness, and we have like two big mountain ranges in there separated by a big valley. So, like I was guiding on one side at a camp and like with my scope, and I could look over at the other mountains and see where one of my drop camp groups was
Sure.
hunting a good area. And I wouldn't see them in the morning till like, 7:30. I'd see some orange guy moving around the mountain along the horse trail or something. And in the evening, like I'd see an orange dot headed back to the camp, right at sundown. I'm
Right.
like, and then they called and left me a message on my sat phone or on my cell phone. I checked with my sat phone, and this is before the InReach days, and yeah, we're not seeing much, and da da. Well, my hunters filled out, and I left the camp where I was at like 3 in the morning, and I rode all the way down to the bottom, all the way back up this other mountain range, and I rolled into their camp at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And we had gotten a couple of fresh inches of snow, and there was like 9 elk tracks that came like within 20 yards of the tent. They come off a tree line and went straight towards the camp and walked literally 50 yards from the camp or less. And I roll in on my horses, and I'm like, hello in camp at 7 a.m. Like 3 hours to get over there. And I woke them up,
Yeah.
and I'm like, guys, I've been watching you from across. You haven't been out early and staying late, and that's the biggest thing with elk. Like that last half hour or the first half hour of the day is the best. I mean, you miss that, you might as well, you're just kind of wasting your time. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
on our guided hunts, we'll hunt, a few hours in the morning and a few hours in the evening. Midday, we don't chase the elk all day long in the bedding areas unless they're bugling,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But for me to try and sneak up on an elk in the bedded timber area myself is somewhat doable. To have a guy or two with me, probably not,
Yeah. 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 It's just,
unless bugling and it's a rut time, right? But other than that, like we're hunting them early and late, but we're out there, at the best time to stay till dark, and then I'll go back to camp, or we'll lay on the side of the mountain, have a mountain nap, or I'll go back and tend to the horses or something, But yeah, you
yeah.
got to be there early and late on elk. This is very critical.
Yeah, man, and I feel like people always justify, particularly in that like yeah, at night, they justify leaving, 10, 15 minutes early or 30 minutes early. And it's always like, well, even if we see one, we can't kill it. It's like, well, it's still super valuable information.
Exactly.
You
You're gonna
know?
for the next day.
Yeah. You gotta,
Like, like I can't tell you how many elk, because we hunt a lot of tree line areas, just like you used to,
yeah,
and still do probably. But I can't tell you how many elk we killed like before the sun came up, like just headed into the timber.
yeah,
You know, I mean, like we were there in the nick of time.
yeah.
It's that first half hour or so. You're really cutting your.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it adds up to, like the effectiveness during that period of time versus other periods of time is gigantic, exponentially more.
And all we have 8 camps, and all our camps are downwind of the predominant, winds, that the normal winds. You always get some weird upslope or something changes up, but
Yeah,
they're set up for the morning. So that in the morning, we're sneaking out of camp, like I said, on foot without horses, and we're moving into the wind, looking for elk out feeding, still trying to catch them before they hit the timber. So in the morning, I always tell my drop camp people, because I'm not guiding them, like move in the mornings, really quiet and slow into the wind, sneaking around looking for those elk that are out feeding. And then in the evening, you're more posted up and glassing some big country and looking for them to come out and then ambush them before dark, right? So
yeah.
that's kind of what we do.
I do very few endorsement deals, and I do no paid reviews because it would affect the type of content, quality of the knowledge I could put out. So an important part of my business model is my membership group. I'll stick a link right here where you can sign up. There's paid and free options. I do a weekly live stream there. There is a thriving community of folks that are helping everybody become a better outdoorsman. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you're an expert, there's something there for you. Go join, guys. It helps me out a ton. It's the way to support this content and to support me. I'll see you there. Yeah, I got a like a strategy question that I always second guess myself on. And it has to do with this whole topic, Scott. And usually it's archery, guys. So I like align with you perfectly. And the problem is that I think I have a little bias because I've always hunted that way. Like I've always hunted, I've always focused on hunting first couple hours, first, last hour and a half, 2 hours, and that's like the primary time that we focus on hunting, being in the right spot till dark or whatever. Every time I talk about this subject publicly, particularly in the context of archery, somebody will say, "Oh, I kill all my bulls between 9:30 and 11:30 in the morning." Like somebody will say that. Somebody will comment to this podcast, and I'm not saying they're wrong, Scott. I'm assuming they're not like lying about it, but for me, is it unique to the kind of stuff that we hunt, or what are your thoughts on it?
I just think it can depend on the intensity of the rut in archery season, and also like if you're hunting tree line areas or maybe just regular forested country with some open parks and meadows and stuff. I mean, maybe there's some differences. I don't know, but like, our elk go uphill to feed, right? So
Yeah.
above tree line. Now we've had a major burn, the biggest in Colorado history, 4 or 5 years ago in 2020, but so that's changed it up a bit. But before that, it was like, you had to be glassing and moving through those tree line areas at daybreak, because this elk are starting to come down as soon as the sun hits them, or maybe even before. So, but yeah, I mean, sure, we'll, if we can't get on them and we'll follow, and they get down the timber and we've seen them or heard them, we'll definitely follow them up and we'll kill elk in mid morning, right? Like your listener might have been talking about.
Right.
But our country was really visual, so you had to
Sure.
be glassing a lot and listening and moving, and so then even if you didn't hear a bugle, you might see those elk a mile or two away, and either you hightail it over there and follow them down in the trees and get on them and get a shot, because obviously it's hard with a bow to shoot something above tree line, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You're always down the trees, but being a real visual area, I think maybe you and I had that a little bit different than some people.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Sure. Well, a lot of places too, Scott, for me, even if I got a bull bugling at 9:30, 10 o'clock, there's really just like, it was hard to get in there with any reasonable chance of not just screwing the whole thing up.
Yeah, sometimes that can be, sometimes your best bet is to back out. I tend to be fairly aggressive, but I won't just pound timber during the middle of the day.
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
that when I don't have something going on. I got to have something going on to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, and our country also has so much water in it that like sitting wallows was not effective and things like that.
Right.
At midday, we have little creeks and seeps and bogs everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
So our elk have a lot of different wallows. They have a lot of different water sources to drink at. It's not like we're in, Arizona hunting water tanks or something.
Yeah, and I think, dude, at least in the flat tops, it's the same exact dynamic, Scott. And I think that's part of the reason why this was so different for me. Is I would watch elk in the timber that were bedded, and I can't think of very many times at all that I saw elk actually get up, at 10 o'clock and line out and actually go somewhere very far. A lot of times they'd move just a little bit in the timber and there's like a seep or something they get water. But this concept that they would get up and line out and like walk a mile to water, I rarely ever saw that.
Yeah, I never saw that either. We're well watered country like the flat tops, where I'm at in the Mummy Range. So yeah, no, there's water everywhere. The elk don't have to line out like that. You're exactly right.
Yeah, yeah, so same dynamic. Scott,
Yeah.
if you I know it's very hard to like generalize, but I know that there's a lot of guys that listen to this that'll ask because I have a huge viewership that's, archery, over the counter guys, Colorado, Idaho, that sort of thing. Um, if you could summarize your like general tactics for archery elk and these elk that get hunted a lot, what does your day look like? What's the most effective strategy?
Well, all our areas are draw, even though if they're not that hard to draw, but
Sure.
have some areas that get some pressure. So, and our elk are, our wilderness elk are real wily. I mean, they're pretty smart. So, like early season, we have a few camps where the rut seems to start kind of early, and so we kind of key in on those areas first, and we transition through the different camps later. But I don't overcall. I'm kind of a believer in figuring out the elk and knowing, having some idea where they're at without overcalling, and they know each other's voices. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yep.
And I don't walk around cow calling constantly or bugling constantly, just very sparingly, and figure out where my elk are, and then I'll call when I'm close. I don't do a
Yeah.
lot of location bugling. If we're really slow and struggling, I might throw a location bugle out once in a while down some canyon or something. I'm not saying I never do it, but I'm like I said, our area is fairly visual, so we'll figure that out and get on them that way, and then call when we get close.
Yeah. Yeah.
And early on in the season, our areas have some really nice bulls. I mean, we kill, I don't know, half a dozen a year over 350, but most of our bulls are smaller, obviously. But, the bigger bulls to me are a little easier to get earlier in the rut when they're not so cowed out and like cowed up and like
Sure.
heard that they won't leave. And so, I don't like, guys always ask me, well, when's the best time to book? I'm like, each week is just different. Let me
Yeah,
give
just
it
different.
per week. It can vary per week. Like in the early season, some of my guys that are repeat guys that really want big bulls come early because, the bulls are a little easier to talk to or call in maybe. But then sometimes, it's slow and hot, but mid season, they're mid rut, then, anything can happen then. It could be, easier to deal with. But I think the later parts of the rut are the hardest. I like,
Sure.
and part, especially like mule deer too, like the deer and the elk, I think also are like, they're hungry for the rut. Those bulls are waiting for those first cows or those bucks for the first does to come in. And they're a little more active, early in the rut than they are, I think, real late.
Yeah. For me, Scott, I always loved archery elk hunting the first week. And I
Yeah.
think it was just simply because same deal. I found most my elk, even during archery season, not by vocalization, by glassing. In that first, week or so, I just knew where the elk were always at. And
Yeah.
so it's just, I just was more consistently into them because of that. And
Yeah.
and so that was the primary reason for me, but it's I mean, it was always, it was never, yeah, I had the same answer to people's questions. There was never a consistent week that was better than another week.
Yeah.
Really, it's just different. Um, on that subject, and I'm sure you've heard it, Scott, because you've hunted in Colorado so much. A lot of guys will say the elk in Colorado get hunted so hard, particularly, couple point units, over the counter stuff, the stuff that gets hunted quite a bit, that they don't vocalize. Do you have an opinion on that, or why people have that observation?
You know, I don't hunt over the counter areas, so it's hard for me to know exactly, but
Sure.
I think it's just, yeah, I mean, those elk might have been taught to, wait to bugle till it's, more heavily in the rut time. And we all know that these male animals, whether it's elk or mule deer, they lose a little bit of their inhibitions, right? In the
Sure.
rut, you know, they're less careful in the peak of the rut than they are early. So I get that, and we have to be pretty careful where we hunt with those big bulls. I mean, you can't screw up more than a time or two, and then they'll go silent, or they'll disappear or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've also heard, like from guys in Idaho that like their elk have quit bugling because of the wolves. Like it's like a
Yeah, I
beat,
heard the same thing.
for the wolves to come in on the elk, and I can tell you, I've called in several mountain lions, cow calling and
Yeah,
bugling,
sure.
I mean, over the years. But yeah, I mean, I hope that helps answer your question, although I don't have a lot of direct experience with over the counter. I'm sure that those elk are smart, and then they lose some inhibitions, when it gets a little later in the rut.
Yeah. I noticed, like, even in the Idaho stuff, because the last couple of years I've been hunting like the Selway and the Salmon River system a bit.
Yeah.
Those elk seem to be very non-vocal, like very similar to the flat tops elk. But if you glass them up and then get close, if you glass a bull up from a mile and a half away, and
Yeah.
then you don't call until you're within 120 yards of him, he'll vocalize just like an elk. If I was guiding on a, a ranch that the elk hunts are 30 grand, that
Yeah,
bull will go crazy just like they vocalize the same. It's almost like they don't, like you're not going to locate bugle them from 900 yards away or 1,000 yards away. They kind of just, they're a little bit less likely to react, but that same concept of getting in close totally works.
that's exactly what I meant. Like if I spot them, even if they're talking, why talk to them? You're too
I
far.
know.
It's fun to bugle, right? But you
Yeah,
got to be
yeah.
and close the distance first is what I do. Same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Well, and the thing is, I mean, I come to the same conclusion, Scott, and I think part of it, man, is like you see them. I'm guilty of this, but I also I've had lots of hunters around me be guilty of it. You see bulls, and then you're like, okay, let's get over there. You see a bull with some cows, and then you cut the distance by 200 yards, but they're still 800 yards away, and you decide to try to get them to vocalize. It's like, well, dude, now he knows where you're at, and they're all looking for you, you know?
Gave up the element of surprise.
Yeah, 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 for sure. I think it's a huge one, man, that people don't, don't think about. Dude, I want to get into like just an update on Colorado politics and that sort of thing, Scott, because I know
Yeah.
you'll be in tune with that. You always have been, and honestly, over the last couple of years, I've gotten less in tune with it on my end. But before we do that, man, two questions. Because you mentioned gear, and I'm sure you have like an authentic perspective on this from your own experience, but also all your clients. Do you have a thought? And I always ask these questions to everybody on here. Do you have a thought on, a segment of gear that's maybe, overemphasized, and then inverse, a segment or type of gear that's underemphasized?
So what do you mean? Can you flesh that out for me just a little bit more?
Yeah, yeah. So like somebody, let's think for me, for instance, guys, I think like rifle hunters might be over obsessed with having 10, 12, $13,000 rifles, or they might be over obsessed with having all matching Sitka gear, right? Like Sitka camo, right? I think that'd be like one that I'd say, hey, you know, before you go on an elk hunt, spending 4 grand on a set of the highest end technical hunting wear might be a little bit overemphasized. You could probably you might be better off emphasizing things like getting a good rifle. Maybe it's a $1,000 rifle, but make sure you get, like, for me it'd be like, make sure you spend $200-300 on rings. So when that rifle falls, you're not worried about the scope.
Yeah.
Do you have any analogous ones to that?
Yeah, I'm 58 years old, right? And I'm still in pretty decent shape, 6'1", 180 pounds. But we used to hunt in blue jeans and flannel
Sure.
and cotton.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah.
Dad and I did great. I mean, we usually got our elk every year. So I think sometimes guys get too geared up, too keyed up on gear. But I definitely like the nice stuff now.
That's
I'm
good stuff.
blue jeans and flannel shirts, I can tell you that. But
Yep.
yeah, I've always heard, like, have a decent rifle, but maybe spend almost as much on the optics, right?
Yeah.
Have a good scope, a good pair of binoculars. Like I on all my binoculars and spotting scopes, I run the best that I think's the best. I run Swarovski. I've got Gitzo tripods that are titanium and carbon fiber. I mean, I like light stuff, but
Sure.
sturdy. You know, I've tried a bunch of different stuff, but yeah, you can get carried away with gear. But I do like my key pieces of gear. But biggest thing is just, I think, more perseverance and in your hunting and not giving up and with your rifles, like same brand and grain of ammo,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and mash and think your gun's still sighted in. And everybody's coming out with these turret rifles and using those now, and that's great. I remember the first couple of years though, we had some problems with guys bringing those and the coming in and out of the scabbard. The sheep hunt I did over in your country, S59, had a guy borrowed a rifle from a neighbor. It was a turret rifle, which is great, turret scope, but every time in and out of the scabbard, the turret was spinning and he didn't even know it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
know your gear, right? And he'd have been better off bringing his own rifle, but something you're used to shooting and know there's no turrets to spin or you have a zero stop. A lot of these scopes now have a 0 stop, so it's a lot easier, you
Yeah,
know.
you can just check it, pull it out of the scabbard and check it hard
Yeah,
against the 0 stop.
got a 6.5 gap, nat ass precision, kind of like a hyped up 6.5 Creedmoor, but or like a you know a faster one, but yeah, I mean the gear wise, and yeah, I like my good stuff, but also you got to use your skills.
Sure. I think that the turret one's interesting, Scott, because I think it's really easy to justify it. And I've got turrets on my rifle, so I'm kind of talking out of my ass here a little bit.
Yeah,
But I do think that for a lot of folks, there's some value in simplicity. Like you don't have to have turrets on just because everybody on the hunts on TV has turrets. Like you don't have to have them, man. And it's another thing to get screwed up.
yeah, totally. Um, yeah, I mean, I use them. I mean, I have two former special forces guys working for me now. That one of them ran the sniper school for the Green Berets and stuff. I mean, so I've been really educated up on this stuff.
Sure.
That these other rifle companies been doing for years. But yeah, I mean a 30-06 with a 3x9 on it in most ranges is going to get the job done on a
Yeah.
Western elk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, and I've shot 10 elk with a 30-06. I also, use a 338. I've got that 6.5 gap, but yeah, you can get carried away on it. I think just, if you're just getting started, you don't need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on gear, just get some decent stuff and go in good areas and apply your skills.
Yeah. Go hunting for sure. Scott, what I'm just curious personally on this. What do you think the average, like the average range across your clients in the hunts that you've seen in Colorado on elk? What do you think the average ranges are?
You mean shooting
Yeah,
range?
shooting ranges.
Gosh, I'd say, most of our elk have been under 300 yards, anyway, with the
Yeah.
rifle. We 100 to 300, but probably most of them in that 200-yard range because
Yep.
obviously you have to get close with the rifle and you don't want to get too close sometimes and blow them up, whereas
Sure.
archery and muzzleloader, you've got to take those chances, you don't have that standoff range. But yeah, I mean, we've shot some across canyons and stuff now with these different setups of these turret rifles and stuff, but I hesitate to do that unless we just have to.
Yeah, if you don't need to, yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
I've kind of same thing, man. I think if I really looked at it, like the vast majority of the elk that I've shot or I've had clients shoot were between like 125 and 250. A lot of them in that realm. You know.
I
Yeah. What about archery? You got any, people ask me on archery, and do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of expandables that well with elk. I mean, guys forget that elk are 4 times the size of a white-tailed deer,
Yeah.
and you've got to get both lungs. So, like, I've got a couple of hunters that are just killers. I mean, these guys. I mean, they not only in Colorado with me, but across the western states, they've hammered some giant elk, and they're shooting like heavy arrows, 2-blade broadheads, grizzly sticks, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because they've just figured out the penetration game. It's just like going to Africa with a bow. You got to penetrate, man. And some of
Yeah.
these expandables, they lose so much energy. It's really just physics, right? I mean, they lose energy opening up, right? So you maybe get one lung, get lucky, you get two, but you got to get 2 lungs on an elk. That's just.
Yeah.
So I'm a big proponent of, a heavier, 2-blade broadhead or maybe a 3-blade if it's fixed, or yeah, the expandables can work, and but I haven't banned them in my camps, but I'm not a big fan on them on elk.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh,
What do you think your average elk archery shot is distance wise?
it's probably gotten a little further over the years with the technology and the way
Sure.
these bows are now, and some of these guys are just deadly with these bows.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
I'd say our average now is probably 40 yards or so, probably 50 maybe even a time.
Yeah.
It'd be less than that. And we still get some traditional archers or guys that just won't shoot over 50, or some guys that won't shoot 20 or 30 traditional.
Right.
But yeah, it's hard to put averages on things, as you know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
for sure. Yep.
average success rate. And I'm like, well, what year?
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, totally, man. But archery is, I mean, archery is interesting to me because even I noticed for me personally, I've shot over the years, but you can like these new bows, you pick them up, and it doesn't take you that long to get right back competent at like 30 to 50 yards. Like most guys, if they shoot for a month, if they, if they're not brand new, they can kind of pick it back up.
Yeah.
You can get there pretty quick. It's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned the heavier arrow stuff too. I've always shot like a lighter arrow, not a lighter, but lighter in terms of like a lot of this trend towards the heavy
Yeah.
arrows. But I actually I got a new setup with grizzly stick arrows and stuff, and um, it's totally different world for me just
Different
ballistically.
way of operating, for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
But
For
go ahead.
years, light, fast, deal. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Scott, what's the let's dive into the update on Colorado, man. Um, the what's your thoughts on the Lion deal? Are you handicapping it? Like, do you got an idea if it's what do you think?
I mean, I'm always an optimist. I live my life that way. I try to.
Sure.
I'm maybe this time we're gonna win this one, but gosh, I don't know. The demographics of the state have changed so much since I got here in 1985.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's just like a different world. But I don't know. This one, I'm thinking we might squeeze by with it and win it. We lost the Wolf by a very tight margin. Um, I almost wonder with all the negative publicity of the Wolves now, if the vote was this year, we might have won that one.
Right.
I don't know. I hate to stick my neck out because I'm an
It's hard to
optimist.
say. Yeah.
I'm We're gonna beat this one back, but boy, there's so many uninformed people out there, that are voters. It's how our system works. But I'll tell you a quick story. Like years ago, I was very involved with the Wildlife Commission and the Outfitting Association. I was the spokesperson for the outfitting in association to the Wildlife Commission. So I went to all the commission meetings and testified all the time. And I was on the board of the United Sportsmen's Council of Colorado and all these kind of things. And then we had twins, and I had to drop a lot of that stuff.
Sure.
But I still keep I still testify once in a while. But I remember, one of the stakeholders groups I was on, we brought to the Division of Wildlife, back then it was called Division of Wildlife. Now it's, of course, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, thanks to Hickenlooper. But we brought this thing like we'd seen some other states do, like where if you're going to have a ballot initiative about wildlife, it would have to pass by a 2/3 vote and in 2/3 of the counties. And I wish we would have done that back then. I think we had the political power and will to probably have gotten that on the ballot and pushed through. I think Utah did that, and you'll never see this happen in Utah. What's happening in
Right.
Colorado? That because those 14 Denver metro counties really rule the roost, right? So
Yeah.
if we had that 2/3 and 2/3 thing here, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah.
And the Game and Fish came back to us and said, we don't need that here. That seems like a lot of work for nothing. And wow, I think now, we should have got that done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the thing is that that's like the crux of the issue, right, Scott, is that there's
Yeah.
not I mean, really there's no in terms of the wildlife subjects, there's not really like local representation. I mean, nobody I mean, a guy's vote in Meeker against the lion deal, it doesn't it does or the wolf deal or whatever, even though he's much more likely to have to deal with the consequences,
Yeah.
it's like it's just as much as like a 19-year-old in Denver with purple hair. It's the same exact vote,
Yeah.
on this subject. And it's really, yeah, it's just the process, but it's an unfortunate deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I hope we can win it. We do a few lion hunts every year. It's not a major part of our business, but doesn't mean we want to give it up. And I personally like to, go out and lion hunt. I mean, I've killed a lion, but yeah, I hope we don't lose it. It's otherwise, I think it's just going to snowball, and get
Yeah,
worse and worse. What's next? They're going to go after the bighorn sheep hunting. I don't know.
yeah. Who knows? Yeah,
You know, it's just It's not wildlife management that I studied, you know.
Sure.
So
Yeah, yeah. No, and it's no, I'm with you on that. Do you have any thoughts on if they did ban it, Scott, like the implications for mule deer or elk? Have you thought about that?
yeah, I mean it's going to be between the, you know, if they do that and then we have the wolves on top of it. I mean, we're going to see our moose really go down. We're going to see our elk go down over time. Mule deer. I mean, yeah, I mean the average mountain lion they say takes a one deer a week, right?
Sure.
You know, if their numbers double or triple, then you know that's a big impact. And the wolf thing, I think, is going to really turn into a crap show. I mean,
It already
you know,
kind of is, right? I mean,
they brought in, you know, we had the North Park wolves that came in from Wyoming, and you know there was a male and female. They had a litter, had 6 pups. Now there's only the male and a male pup left. The rest of them have been shot or went back into Wyoming, got killed. Yeah, they get shot here. Let me fix
right.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That I know of. But then we brought in those 10, and you know we just had a meeting here locally with the Game and Fish about the wolves, the ranchers, because the, you know, the Game and Fish is starting this thing now with the 10J federal rule where you can get a retroactive permit if you shoot a wolf that's, you know, chasing your cattle or, you know, your livestock, horses, whatever. You can get a retroactive permit if the story checks out that you had to kill the wolf in self-defense of your stock.
Yeah.
And they said there that those 10 wolves, you know, two groups of 2 of them have joined together. So that's 4 of the 10. There's two and 2, but the other 6 were just like lone wolves, and they're going like 60 to 70 miles a day, just
Just wandering all over.
wandering all over creation. One of them came through here and then went back to Bull Mountain and got killed by a mountain lion. So now we're down to 9 that I know of. I haven't checked in on it lately. I've been busy putting camps in, but yeah, it's. I don't think people are ready for what's going to come with that. You know, we have more human population here than the other Western states combined, where there's wolves, and you know, I think people are going to be getting their pets sniped off, their livestock. It's going to get ugly, I think, and the lion thing just going to add to that. You know, it's going to hurt our deer. It's going to hurt even sheep. I mean, we've had a couple of lions in my neck of the woods that really got turned on to sheep and killed
Sure.
like 4 sheep. You know.
Yeah.
And without being able to go hunt those lions and put some pressure on them or get them, man, I mean, they could have taken down our sheep herd here.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I don't get it. You know, like in California, there are Sierra Diablo bighorn herds that have been decimated by the lions there. They can't hunt them.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about this whole deal, Scott, is I don't know where we lost. We lost the idea or we lost touch with the reality that all the stuff we're hunting and all the stuff that people see off the highway, it's all it's super managed by people. Like, or I should say, there's highly involved management for all these bighorn sheep herds, all the moose in Colorado, and
Yeah.
it's like there's this idea that somehow has snuck back in that these predators are going to come back in here. We're going to bring them back, and they're going to do all the management in a ecosystem that, like, anybody. I mean, you've been all over the world, man. You've been to British Columbia and the Yukon and all that stuff, and I have too. Like, those are different, and those are totally different worlds. And even there the ecosystem is affected by people. But the idea that Colorado
Yeah.
is not, everything is not managed is insane. And then that's the wild thing, Scott, is it's this irrational deal where if you figured out the economics, like how much did it cost, over the years, all the effort to bring back, the 50 sheep in this whatever herd, right? And then literally a lion, a female lion and a couple kittens could sit on that group of sheep and just done, wipe them
Yeah.
out. Or whatever, it doesn't matter. Just a single could wipe them out. It's like equivalent of millions and millions of dollars that just evaporates.
Yeah, and you know as well as I do, like in the biology and the management that we have with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I mean, they do a pretty good job, but they're always behind the curve. Like when I
Right.
see like moose right now in a couple of my areas, I'm like, yeah, I've been hounding on to cut tags because they've overdone it a bit with the tag numbers, and they're always it always takes them couple 3 years to catch up and go, yeah, you're right.
Sure.
So like what bothers me is like if we lose the lethal hunting control of these lions, I think the game and fish will still step in at times and try to take out a problem lion in the future or something, but it's the damage is going to be done by that lion.
Yeah.
Then you know, so they're just too slow. You know, it's
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
bureaucratic way of anything. Any of these agencies you and I deal with are too slow. So it's just they can't react quick enough. So that's
Yeah.
where losing the hunting of these animals is like a double whammy, because then not only does it tie the state's hands to manage them, even the little bit of management they can do, they're always late on.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Sure.
so it's a problem, and I guess I'm happy that in the balance of my career I didn't have to deal with these things. I'm kind of in the twilight of my career, but still it bothers me for my kids and my friends. They're younger, so.
Yeah. No, and I'm with you, man. I hope the same thing that you hope though, and I have the same positive attitude about it. I feel like there is some voter remorse over over the wolf thing, and
Yeah,
so I hope that comes across like in this lion deal, and there's enough people out there that realize like, hey, we didn't before we voted on the wolf thing, we didn't get the whole story because this thing
yeah,
turned into like a debacle. My problem with it, Scott, is that I get biased media, right? So all the media that I consume, like on social media and all of that,
yeah.
in my mind, I'm like, why would anybody vote for this lion deal? But I'm curious, man. Like, what do you see in Colorado? Are there billboards about the ban, or what's there? Like, how are they getting out to people to try to vote for the ban? I guess.
I haven't seen a lot of that yet. There's petition drives at like the grocery stores here in Fort
Sure.
Collins, stuff like that. But I haven't, like a lot of people now, I don't consume a lot of local TV, I try not to go to Denver unless I have
Yeah,
to,
yeah, I get it. Yeah, yeah, totally.
but yeah, around Fort Collins here, I don't see any advertising or anything. I think they're just relying on the apathy and on the liberal way of, the way things have changed in Colorado, since we first went blue with Obama, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, sure.
Um, but yeah, I mean, everybody's got their niches of communications. Like, I get emails and, Instagram notices and stuff about the lion thing. But I haven't seen a big mass media presence about it in the Colorado media yet.
Right. Yeah, which probably they probably timing wise is probably going to be here in the next few months.
Yeah.
You know. So, but it'll be interesting. I do feel, Scott, that a lot of the pro hunting groups have kind of been more on top of this, and also more like meshed.
Yeah, I think the wolf thing kind of woke some people up, and this comes pretty quickly on the heels of the wolf vote. So I think some people have woken up a little bit. I
Yeah,
hope.
yeah, for sure. Cool. Hey, the last question I have is on the new 5-year structure. Any big things people should consider, or that you think is an issue, or positive or negative?
Well, I think one of the positives for me as an outfitter was, doing away with the 9-day break between first and second
Yeah,
rifle. Way too long.
sure.
Now they're going to start first season on a Wednesday and have a break in between first and second that's shorter. Um, I'm glad that, when I made my comments, I mentioned that I was a stakeholder in what we called Big Lab, Big Game License Allocation Project back in the late 90s. I was one of the 20 stakeholders on that. And I said, look, we looked at all these things back then. I mean, it's just funny how things just keep repetitively being brought up that we've already worked on,
Yeah,
but
sure.
I said, like, let's go with the middle option, which is, in the old days, we had only a 2-day break between first and second rifle, and that was brutal.
Yeah,
Not enough time.
I remember that.
Then we went to a 9-day break, which is like too much. So now we've settled in the middle. So I do like that part of it. I'm not a fan of adding deer hunting to the first rifle season, because we did research back in those days that showed the harder you pressure the elk in the first rifle season, the quicker it drives them down into private property and things. And now we're going to add in, you know, deer hunting and first rifle in some areas. I'm going to try to stop that in my areas, you know. First rifle has always been kind of like an elk only high quality experience, you know, without too many clogged up trailheads, you know. I mean, still busy, but not as busy as second, third season, right?
Right.
So I'm not a fan of that one. But other than that, I mean, it didn't change a great deal. I do think we need to go. I mean, people will love and hate this, but I like draws. I mean, I've made
Sure.
my living draws and dealing with the draws. So, you know, the over the counter areas, I think, kind of need to come to an end, and they are slowly, you know,
Yeah.
doing that. Um, I don't know. It's a mixed review, but overall positive, I thought.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, and I'm with you, Scott. I don't think there's I mean, there's on the over the counter thing, there's obviously exceptions. There's little honey holes here and there, but I don't know anybody that's, outfitting or personally hunting in over the counter areas that is saying that there's more elk than there were 10 years ago. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
The other one I didn't quite understand was going to two different rifle pronghorn seasons. Like the units that we hunt, like even up in North Park, where there's a lot of BLM and public land, like nobody's hunting anymore. I mean, we're the only ones still out there after Saturday or even
Yeah.
Sunday. Monday, there's nobody out there. Like, why do we need another rifle season to spread out the pressure? Everybody's done and gone. I don't get that one.
Yeah, why? Yeah, who knows? Must have been somebody's pet project or
Yeah,
something.
but
On
you know,
On the what do you think the effect? So one thing about the shorter gap between the seasons is on average it brings forward fourth rifle season for like deer, right? So third and fourth rifle season, the dates are forward. Do you
yeah.
view that as a good thing, Scott, or you got a thought on it?
Yeah, I think it's generally a good thing, other than our deer management right now is a freaking disaster.
Yeah,
You know, with chronic wasting disease management, you know, where they're trying to kill off more of the mature bucks and reduce the herds, and like the cure is worse than the disease. I mean, there's
sure.
one thing that people don't hear is there's two genetic strains of these deer, both whitetail and mule deer. Within them, there's two genetic strains. One of the strains, um, you know, it's called the 225S deer, as in Sam. It's about a certain gene. They get the disease much easier, and they die within 3 years.
Yeah,
The 225F, as in Frank, genetic deer, hardly ever get it in the wild. If they do get it, they live 7 years with it. Well, that's a non-issue. 7 years. I mean, I'd love it for all the deer to live 7 years. I mean,
right.
so we keep pounding away on these deer herds and on these mature bucks, thinking that we're helping when we're just delaying the inevitable. Let nature take its course. Let those 225F deer become the only deer we have.
Right.
But by both of them, because you can't tell them apart in the field with all these increased tags, it's just a joke. And then, you know, they talk about putting pressure on the mature bucks, and that'll help, you know, reduce prevalence because the bucks spread the disease, you know, during the rut. Well, great. But aren't we going to drive that disease into the younger bucks, all the earlier in their life cycle then? I mean, when there's no big bucks to breed, these does are not going to go unbred. The forkhorns are going to breed them.
Right.
And they're picking up the disease by traveling around to these different doe groups, and they're spreading it as forkhorns and 3x3s. And so what are we doing here? I mean, nobody's looked at the unintended consequences are always huge in these kind of things. What's the
Sure.
unintended consequence of having all these younger bucks doing the breeding and getting the disease even earlier in their life cycle? But
Right.
I talk to Game and Fish about these things, and it's just like over their head, and like, well, the word on the street is we need to shoot more mature bucks. They can't tell you why. They can't tell you a long term, you know, this disease is not going anywhere. It's in our soil, it's in our water.
Right.
Our plains where we're at, we had the most fantastic deer hunting. Even when we had 20 and 30% CWD. I mean, some of our best years were 17, 18, 19. Now they've tripled the tags, and it's tougher. We're
Right.
down to percent kill on big bucks, and what's the point? At 20-30% CWD, we had plenty of big bucks and great hunting, and just our numbers of mule deer were fine. I mean, it's a joke. I mean, they're playing God, and I think there's some politics with these other states that don't have CWD yet, wanting the states that do have it to really pound their deer so that it doesn't
Right.
get to these other states. So we get our hunting ruined by too many tags, to try and protect Arizona and some of these other states. I mean, it's just, I see the reasoning in that, but I don't. It's not equitable to us. You
Yeah,
know.
and I wonder. I mean, we could talk about this probably for hours,
Yeah.
Scott, and I. It's such an interesting deal too because you realize how there's not really like super solid science on a lot of this stuff. Like you say, Arizona doesn't have it. Well, I mean, is there areas in Arizona that do have it, but they're not testing? And then even within that, is there bias for certain areas where they think like, man, we probably have it, let's not test. You know what I mean? I mean, I think that kind of stuff probably exists, and it's probably screwing up the whole strategy around it.
Well, I know the biologist down there, one of them, Jim Heffelfinger, he's a good guy, and they have been testing a lot of their units, and they even have now a course that in Arizona the hunters can take to get informed about CWD, and to me, it's indoctrination.
Yeah,
It's all the same indoctrination about kill, kill, kill,
yeah,
and so I have a big problem with CWD management. You know, the model that came out in the year 2000 that, oh my God, the sky's falling, we're going to lose all our deer, is proven to not be true.
right.
Yeah, the population will be suppressed somewhat by CWD, but there's not been a single population of deer that's ever been lost because of CWD. Not one. And
Yeah.
it's not anywhere anyway. And we got to learn how to live with this disease and not just shoot everything. And it's, you can reduce your herds down. And they say there's some anecdotal evidence that in areas that got cold or hunted hard, that the prevalence has been lower there later on. Well, but they say it's indicative and all these words that because they can't prove it.
Yeah, yeah, that's why they're using. Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
use those words like, we think maybe this would help, the long term. Well, what really helped the long term is let the 225F deer take hold, and just, that would be the great,
Yeah, just hope that they evolve beyond it. That's basically like the only hope. And they're always gonna throw in there like, well, yeah, but there's all these people eating it. Could it jump species? Like,
Yeah, I just saw a new study where that got debunked again, where they I could send it to you. I just got the emails on it. But yeah, there was another study that came out and said, no, it's not it hasn't transferred to people even in these areas. I mean, Cliff, probably no one has handled more CWD positive deer than me and my guides.
sure,
My guide. I mean, we're in the epicenter of the disease in Larimer County, where it started at the Foothills Research Campus here, run in coordination with CSU and Colorado Parks and Wildlife. That's where it started back in the 60s. You
right,
know, jumped out of the scrapies, or out of the domestic sheep. There's a
yeah.
disease called scrapies. It jumped from them in this facility into the deer and the elk.
Dude,
And
isn't it, Scott? Like, I want you to finish your first point, but isn't it weird that what you just said in the people with kind of like in the know, that's like common knowledge.
yeah,
That it like, and I've talked to biologists who are basically like there, and like, and then for some reason it's like, dude, why is there just this? It's kind of like the Wuhan deal. It's like, dude, this is
exactly.
where it came from. Like, what? I don't understand why we're having this debate about it.
Hey, look, our now retired Northeast regional biologist was a grad student at that facility in the mid late 60s, and he was there. He
Yeah,
told me he saw it. That's where it came from, and they didn't know what was wrong with the deer, so they called it wasting disease. They thought they were starving. They took they took deer from this facility, released them into the wild.
yeah,
They would get healthy again, like they weren't feeding them quite right in the facility. They brought in wild bucks to breed the captive does, and then they turned the bucks back out into the wild.
yeah.
They sold and traded deer and elk across to the state or I mean across the country to other game
Yeah.
farms. And
And those are literally like the hot spots.
yeah,
Like the hot spots where they
yeah,
sent the deers, like the map is like red there.
yeah. That's the foci where it's at.
Yeah.
And I still get people every day, not every year. They're like, "Well, it's probably always been here. We just didn't know it." No, it wasn't always here. It
Yeah.
came from that facility, or at
Yeah.
least
Yeah.
the first facility it was ever found in.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So,
they were doing research like they were handling a prion disease.
well, they didn't even know what it was back then, but they were moving deer around, and
No, but what I'm saying is they had Scrapey or Scrappy in the facility.
yeah, I mean, domestic sheep have had scrapies for hundreds of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
He
Yeah.
makes a deal about that, you know.
Right.
It's never been transferred to sheep herders,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
But
There's
it's isn't it coincidence that like these deer were in a facility where they were already doing like prion related research,
yeah.
right? So yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind of a wild thing.
I went to a meeting at SCI this last February about or January, whatever it was, about CWD, and like the breeders in Texas. I don't mean the deer ranchers. I mean like the breeders that have these small pens.
Sure.
They've basically been able to eradicate it out of their systems because they're dealing with this 225S and the 225F genomes in deer, and they're just not breeding the S deer anymore. So
Yeah.
they have effectively removed it from their facilities by just dealing with 225F deer. I know we can't do that on the wild landscape because we can't tell them apart in the field, but we can surely just stop the indiscriminate killing of these deer, and you know, over time those 225F deer should take over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it might be 1,000 years from now, Cliff, but these biologists, they want to do something now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
play God, but you know what? Sometimes it's best just to not play God. So,
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, like I think your original point, Scott, is that particularly from a hunter's perspective, I've seen this in a lot of different things. You see it with all of a sudden mountain goats are invasive, so let's knock them off of this mountain or whatever, or this or
yep,
whatever. And a lot of it's like let's just try it. I think, and I'm not like I've never had
yeah,
this discussion with a biologist, but I think a biologist or a game manager is always like, well, let's just give it a try. But they don't have any incentive to deal with the negative consequences that affects the hunter. They're just like, well, it's worth a try.
yeah. I mean, we had some of the best mule deer hunting in the world, and now we're struggling with it a bit, and we still get some big bucks, but not like we were. So it sticks in my craw, and
Sure.
yeah, seem like biased or whatever, but I remember the years when we had very high CWD and we still had plenty of deer and we had great bucks, and it's like, what's the problem? I mean, yeah, we're going to lose some deer to CWD, absolutely,
Right.
but you can't put the genie back in the bottle as much as I
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just here. Yep. It is what it is.
Yeah,
Um, it's interesting to see like how it evolves, but I'm with you. Like with the mule deer in Colorado, it's particularly interesting. And also, Scott, like I think that it's weird. It's weird, Scott, because amongst the hunting community, everybody knows like the Colorado mule deer brand, right? It's not about just shooting a buck. It's about shooting like big bucks. That's what the brand of Colorado mule deer
yeah,
is. And it doesn't matter if you're like a trophy hunter or meat hunter or whatever. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that that's why people go to Colorado. The chance to have a cool mule deer hunt, but also the chance to be in some area where wasn't that hard to draw a tag, and all of a sudden they've like stirred up a 200-inch deer or something, right? Like that's the brand. When that brand goes away, really mule it's totally different thing.
yeah. As you know from the West Slope experience you have, they really increased the tags there too, and now our brand, our what we're known for, has really been cut back. And you can read about it in Hunting Fool or Epic or any of these deals. They're talking about it, but it's a travesty to me. I
Sure.
mean, we weren't going to lose our mule deer by leaving them alone.
Right.
Yeah, CWD is going to spread throughout the world. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, it just is what it is. Yeah, yeah.
And we'll have big bucks. Yep. And it's in the soil. Like, it's in the uptake. The plants are now uptaking it.
Right.
You know, that's been proven. So we're not getting rid of it by even if we got rid of all the deer, it's still here. It's in
Yeah.
the soil.
Yeah,
Plant.
you hear wild stories of like these guys killing all the deer in their pens and then like taking the topsoil off and
Yeah.
then 2 years later putting deer back in there and the deer get it.
They tried that at the facility we were talking about, the research campus here by Fort Collins. Didn't work.
Yeah,
You
they
know,
just got it immediately.
you can't get rid of these prions. Are unfortunately they are an amazing thing. Like in a bad way, it's a bad deal. There's really not an effective way to get rid of those dang things.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
bad.
No, for sure. Well, Scott, I'm pushing you on time, man. I enjoyed the conversation, dude. We covered all sorts of topics. I appreciate your time. Where can people follow you and in any of that, Scott?
Yeah, well, my email is hunt_Colorado@yahoo.com. I do have an Instagram now, finally, which is eliminator with 2 M's.
Okay, nice. I like it.
But that's about it, really. I'm not really on Facebook or that kind of thing. But
Website for the outfitting.
yeah, Comanche with 1 M, ComancheWildernessOutfitters.com.
Good deal. Hey, Scott, I got one random question for you. And
Okay.
and you can think about this, man. So you could email me or whatever. But if there was somebody that's like similar to you, man, that has a lot of experience but might be interesting for people to hear from, do you got any recommendations?
Yeah, let me think about that one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think I mean, I think there's this bin of information out there and like opinions on stuff that people should hear from and they don't that often. You know what I mean?
Chris Journey from Craig.
What's that?
Have you ever talked to Chris Journey from Craig?
I haven't, but I mean I met him back over the years,
Yeah.
but he'd be a good one.
Yeah, I mean he's got some perspectives on things similar to mine in some respects, but
Cool.
I'll think of some others.
All right, thanks, man. I appreciate it, Scott.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks, man. If you enjoyed this content, do me a huge favor. Subscribe on whatever platform you consume it on. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever works for you guys. Everything else is on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. Go there and it's going to be very apparent to you that I work my ass off just to not have a real job. All the hunts I guide, all the seminars I put on, all the unique experiences I offer, and the membership site, all the details are there.